Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Genesis, which is our range of natural supplements designed to help people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. And I'm joined again today by one of our regular and one of my favorite guests, Jessianna Saville. Jessianna is a renal dietary nutritionist. She heads up KNI, Kidney Nutritional Institute, and their team of renal dietitians there. Jessianna is a wealth of information. She has a special interest in PKD and all diseases that involve the kidneys. She's busy training doctors and other dietitians on how to correctly treat this disease and to keep up with the latest research coming out, which Jessianna and I just had a discussion about before we hit record. Jessianna, thank you for joining me again today.
Great to be here, Fiona. Thank you.
So we're going to continue our discussion about protein and then down the track of amino acids, and we're sort of working our way through them. And this is one of my favorite amino acids, but I'm beginning to change my mind after the discussion we've just had about it. So talk to me about all things glutamine.
Okay, so glutamine, right? The quest this year is to understand all the amino acids. I'm very intrigued with them because they're involved with so much. So when originally I was looking at researching this, I was like, okay, cool. There's going to be some great studies about how glutamine helps the kidneys because it seems like every amino acid seems to help the kidneys. But what I was really surprised to find is nothing. I could find no study where they're like, oh, like glutamine is this like great therapeutic target or use glutamine. There wasn't any. And so as I started looking at it, I learned a lot of interesting things that made me feel quite cautious of how glutamine would be used for people with kidney disease. Now, this is actually really important because I would say in the functional integrative world, in the world of gut healing, in the world of immune health, in the world of like anti-aging, muscle building, glutamine is like a superstar. Glutamine is probably one of the most common supplements that you see recommended all the time. Is a glutamine. Even when I first started getting into the gut, that was one of the first things that people would recommend, or like my mentors be like, oh, like, did you put L-glutamine on their protocol? Is going to help heal tight junctures. And I do think after reading through some of the research on how glutamine is involved with the kidneys, I feel very cautious about using that as a supplement.
Yeah, it's so fascinating for you to say that because, like you, I use glutamine for gut healing and gut protocols, and I assumed, like you, when we started this, and I'm like, there'd be lots of stuff to say glutamine might be good. I'm like, maybe it heals, if it's healing tight gut junctions in the gut, maybe it's like, if there's like damage to kidney tissue, maybe it's involved in some of that. But no, no, we found the opposite. So dig in, because take us through what you actually found the relationship is between glutamine and the kidneys, because what you were sharing with me was really fascinating about what the kidneys use glutamine for.
Okay, so glutamine, again, glutamine is an amino acid. So you have protein, right? You eat your piece of chicken or beans or whatever. It's going to take that protein and it breaks it down into these little building blocks called amino acids. Now, amino acids go all over the body and they're broken down into other things to create hormones and energy and all sorts of things. Now, we used to think that the liver was like this great generator of glutamine in our body, right? It's something you eat, but it's also something your body can generate. However, more of the science now shows that the kidneys produce glutamine from glucose. So they take carbohydrates and they turn it into an amino acid. It's about 20 to 25%. That's a lot of glutamine that the kidneys can produce. So glutamine, the kidneys, number one, produce glutamine in that way, or I'm sorry, they produce glucose in that way. The other thing that's really interesting is that the kidneys use glutamine to help balance acidosis. Mm-hmm. So that's the other place where glutamine is tying into the kidneys. And you think, oh, well, that's good, right? Like we need some glutamine to help balance acidosis. And who cares if the kidneys are converting glucose or glutamine into glucose? Like, why does that matter? Yeah. But like, that's what we're seeing as far as where the kidneys are using it. So we do know that glutamine is involved in the kidneys for sure.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. So to recap, what you're saying is if you've taken gut healing supplements and lots of glutamine, your body or your kidneys can actually convert glutamine into glucose. And of course, we know glucose is something that we want to avoid in chronic kidney disease. And you were showing me a really great diagram, and I don't know if you want to share that or not, but that in something like polycystic kidney disease, right, where we know that we want to maybe move patients or clients more towards ketogenesis to deplete glucose cycle, because we know the glucose cycle and mTOR and all of those kind of things, it slows down cell proliferation and growth. We do the same in cancer. That's why we use a ketogenic type diet, is we're trying to starve the cells of glucose, which can cause cellular turnover. But interestingly, if you're taking glutamine, say you're doing your cancer protocol or you're doing your PKD protocol and you're taking a heap of glutamine, there's a little cycle on the side where the cells go, okay, well, you've starved us of glucose, but that's fine. We can take the glutamine that you're giving us, and the kidney cells, not the liver cells, as you pointed out, can then convert that into glucose and keep cellular turnover and acceleration going. So in things like PKD, it was flagged in cancer, PKD, diabetic kidney disease, like lupus, right? That was the other one.
Yeah, lupus was another one we saw that. Yeah. So let me show this graphic, because I'm a visual person, and I'm sorry for this is just my document. So
there's
this
such
is not a good resolution, but it's a good graphic, right? So here's your TCA cycle, right? One of the ways your cells make energy. So glucose from carbohydrates, it converts to pyruvate, acetyl-CoA, and then that goes into the cycle, and we can make, energy. And then over here you have glutamine, which goes to glutamate, and goes also into this cycle here. So again, like you said, if you have any disease that depends on cell proliferation from glucose, if you're cutting glucose down, you're going on a ketogenic diet, that's great. But our body's super smart. It's kind of like when the pantry's bare, and it's the end of the week, you haven't been grocery shopping for a while, and like the only thing that's left is like that, like either the one cereal that no one wants, or like the dusty box of graham crackers or whatever. If you're super hungry, you would eat that. Or whatever. We all have the pantry thing that just sits in there. But if you're super hungry, you would eat that. And that's kind of how your cells are, right? Like they would prefer glucose, but if they don't have glucose, they'll be like, okay, maybe I'll use ketones, or maybe I'll just use some glutamine first. And so it's going to really slow down the impact overall. So, and I mean, the take home is like, if you look at it, you're like, okay, well, then we should restrict glutamine also in the diet. And the thing is that you can't do everything with diet, because you do have to eat. And there are other nutrients than in these little cycles. And there's other things that are going on other than just, what's in a TCA cycle. So you can't necessarily say, okay, if this is a disease like PKD, we're going to really focus on cutting back on glucose and glutamine, and that's going to starve the cells. It's totally irrational, because you just be like drinking water or just like drinking oil, and like that's it. And that is not going to get you anywhere good fast. So really the big take home for me when I start looking at it is like, if you have something like PKD, or if you have something like lupus or diabetic kidney disease, or maybe you have renal carcinoma, the take home would be to be careful, especially if you're supplementing with L-glutamine, because L-glutamine is great for cell proliferation if you want that, for example, in muscle growth, but it is not good if you don't want cells to proliferate, like in PKD, for example.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So that pathway is called glucominolysis or something like that, right? Glutaminolysis. And so I also wondered too, genetic predisposition, right? So when we move people into ketogenic diets and hopefully the body starts producing ketone bodies, you sometimes have those patients where you're like, I don't understand, like they're on nothing. Why are we not producing ketone bodies? And I wonder whether they have an upregulated, like it'd be in the GABA genes or something like that, an upregulated ability to convert glutamine into glucose. And until you completely deplete that, you don't move them into ketosis as well. So that's one of my theories around some of these patients where you're just like, I'm not sure why that happens. But no, I'm like, so that would be like one thing I'd be thinking of those patients where you're trying to move them into ketosis and that doesn't happen. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that was interesting, like you said, it's used in metabolic acidosis. And one of the things that we used to, or I used to do when I did a lot of genetic work, is sometimes you'd have patients with, if I'm doing, running SNPs and gene testing, you'd have patients with the CBS gene. They look like they're producing a lot of ammonia, and they're the patients where any supplement you give them, they react. And so one of the things that you would do is put them on a low protein diet to reduce ammonia byproducts. And then you would work on the gut microbiome, but you would give them molybdenum and charcoal to mop that whole pathway up. And glutamine would be one of those things that you would have to avoid because they'd be very sensitive to glutamine. So I find that interesting with glutamine and ammonia, and then how it works with regulating pH, but whether that's a short-term thing or not, like the metabolic acidosis. So I just find the whole thing really interesting because as glutamine is like one of the first things we use, and that, like you say, you get all excited about using it in gut healing. And now I'm like, well, if I've got a cancer patient or PKD, and you might have to explain the lupus part to me, because is that via the immune system that it does that? Because I guess lupus so much as a cell.
Yeah, so it has to do, again, like the I have to pull up my notes here. So what they found, okay, so it has to do with the immune system and the T cells. We probably could have a whole podcast just on the immune system and the T cells. But what they found is that when you had let me see, I gotta pull this up. So when you have a decrease in your glutamine levels, that can lead to eventually a reduction in your Th17 differentiation. And so that would be important because you're not going to, it's going to change how you produce antibodies.
Gotcha.
And so what I understand is that, maybe I'm wrong, and somebody who's a total amazing immune expert, please correct us in the comments if I'm wrong. But is that if you have that reduction in Th17 differentiation, then you potentially would have more generation of the antibodies, which would then drive the autoimmune disease.
No, that sounds right. That one I just couldn't piece together. So fascinating. So the other thing that I wanted to point out that you'd said to me before we hit record, and you'd made this comment before I was asking something else about, you can't really control glutamine intake via diet, because as we know, it's generally your meat, fleshy products that are high in glutamine. But the studies show that vegans and vegetarians who are not consuming high glutamine containing foods naturally had much higher levels of plasma glutamine, right?
Yeah. So when I was looking at glutamine as a topic, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I know the answer, right? If you do more plant-based diet, alkaline diet, which we talk about all the time, then you probably just don't have as high glutamine levels. Done, right? That's the connection. And I was wrong. I was totally wrong. When I looked into it, I found that vegans actually have a 13 to 25% higher levels of glutamine than omnivores. And I was like, what? How can that be? Because they're not eating meat, which is very rich in those amino acids in particular. But I think you had pointed out it comes down to that they have healthier guts, so they're producing more glycine, which then allows them to produce more glutamine.
Yeah, and that's what the research showed when we dug in, because I was, I don't understand this. It is the change in the microbiome. You get, it's a B. wasabi or something, it's a very specific microorganism in the gut, which increases glycine production, which glycine then moves through into the glutamine production. So it's fascinating. Your body just naturally produces more through the gut microbiome. And so, I look at all this and go, wow, it really, glutamine processing does come back to the health of the gut. We do use glutamine to reduce tight gut junctions and gut health. But maybe when you've got people with PKD and things like lupus or renal cell carcinoma or any sort of carcinoma, maybe you're better off still doing gut health, but taking out the glutamine, making sure you get the microbiome right and regulated, and not using things like glutamine, but maybe using, like we know, zinc heals the gut lining just as well. Maybe we're better off using something like zinc, which we know has some therapeutic benefits inside kidney disease. If you haven't heard that podcast, go and find the one I did with Lindsay. And then glutamine is something that we, unless you've got someone that's maybe got really high zonulin levels, and you, like you mentioned, so one of the tests we can do is check the zonulin, which really means the gut's breaking itself down. Maybe short term, you were talking about pulsing it and doing things like that. But otherwise, unless you really know what you're doing as a practitioner, avoiding glutamine supplementation in those specific types of kidney disease, PKD, anything with excessive cellular turnover, lupus, things like that, is probably actually what we should be doing as clinicians, which is interesting because it's not, avoiding glutamine is not at the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking of kidney disease.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was not for me either. I was like, yeah, like it's a great amino acid, but now I'm double, like, I'm thinking about it again. And I'm, again, like on a dietary side, because a lot of people are like, oh, I just want to do with food. You just can't control glutamine with food. Like, you're just not going to be able to. It's, if you eat a super heavy plant-based diet, you got a healthier gut, which is good, but you're going to produce a little bit more glutamine. But if you eat a more meat-heavy diet, you're going to have an unhealthy gut that's going to cause its own problems, and you're not necessarily going to be restricting glutamine either, right? Because you get it from all the animal foods. So I don't think you can modify this with diet. It is just as a patient being educated to look at your supplements and, again, be wise about what you're going to be trying. Or if you are going to try L-glutamine, probably you would only do it if you had a lot of kidney function and you're using it temporarily to heal your gut, and then you would come off of it. In my opinion, that's how I would look at it.
No, definitely. It's how, after having a look through and looking at some of those research studies, it's exactly how I'd look at it as well, which, again, I was so happy-go-lucky with, we're going to treat the gut. We always treat the gut. Let's put in some L-glutamine short term. And by all means, we use it short term. But now I'm like, right, okay, anything with cell proliferation, I need to find better ways to maybe heal the gut, modulate the microbiome, and leave L-glutamine for if I really want the bodybuilders and tissue proliferating kind of effects, versus we don't really want that in kidney disease.
Yeah, love that. Cool. Good. I wish I had like a good, like meaty, like here's what you eat, but there's just nothing with glutamine on that today, but really, really good to be educated about not supplementing with it.
Yeah. So I guess the takeaway is, if you've got chronic kidney disease and you've definitely got lower function, say level, if you're stage 3 and below, probably glutamine isn't something that you're going to want to look at. And then looking at treating the gut and healing, leaky gut, maybe there's some other better ways to do it and not using glutamine. So fascinating, Jessianna. Thank you so much. Like I say, I always learn so much with you, but when we dug through this before we hit record, I was like, what? My love affair with glutamine has completely gone out the window. So I'm going to go and dig away on more of the research. I'll put I've got some great links from nature journals and things like that. I'll put the links in below, and Jessianna had linked some great articles as well. So yeah, thanks again, Jessianna. As always, if you want to know more about Jessianna and her team, you can head over to kidneynutritionalinstitute.org. I'll put the link below. They have a lot of great free resources on there. Are you running a PKD intake shortly, Jess?
We just started our January groups. Our next one will start in May. And we do just it 3 times a year because it's really important for us, the journey that people go on together. So it's not evergreen, but if you wait, it's well worth the wait. Amazing experience.
100% it is. Yeah, people get amazing results with it. And you get to go through with the community. So I'll put all the links up there. They've lots of amazing free resources and great recipes on their page. And anywhere in the world, you can link up with any one of Jessianna or her team as a renal dietitian. Again, we highly recommend that you do personalised care when it comes to chronic kidney disease. for reasons just like we spoke about today, that glutamine may not actually be your friend. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You'll find us on all social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. That way you will get notified anytime we put up new content. Jessianna and I will be back to do another amino acid. I can't remember who's on our hit list next, but I'm sure it'll be super interesting.
Okay, sounds good.
Everybody for listening. Thanks, Jessianna. Talk to you later.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.